Police are working to find out who's responsible for shooting 14 people on the west side Monday.
East Garfield Park sits on Chicago's west side. And the statistics here don't lie. We're talking about 73.1 crimes per every 1,000 residents. That's 266% above the national average. But here's where it gets really intense. Violent crime is 338% higher than the rest of the country. Let that sink in for a second. If you live in this neighborhood, your chance of becoming a victim is 1 in 10. Not 1 in 100, not 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10. And it costs each household around $2,300 annually, just from the violence alone. The area records 47.92 violent crimes per 1,000 inhabitants, with property crime adding another 25.18 incidents to that count. The geography of danger here is pretty specific. We're looking at roughly 1.5 square miles, bounded by North Avenue to the north, Madison Street to the south, Western Avenue to the east, and Pulaski Road to the west. About 20,000 people call this place home, and over 95% of them are African American. Madison Street runs right through the heart of it all, and that corridor has become the epicenter of most violence. So what does a normal day look like here? Well, picture this. A drive-by shooting that lasts exactly 3 seconds. 13 people get hit. Among the victims, 3 kids, including a 3-year-old. In another incident, a 15-year-old sits in a car when bullets rip through the windshield, hitting him in the neck. Then there's the family, 2 women and 5 children, getting into their vehicle when a gray sedan rolls by slowly. Someone inside opens fire. Siblings aged 5, 14, and 15 all get shot. 3 more people standing on the sidewalk go down too, including Tamaya Russell, a 20-year-old psychology student from Rockford. But what really gets you is the response. When a man collapses in the middle of the street from an overdose, people around him just watch. Some even laugh. Nobody helps. Someone eventually calls 911. But the indifference cuts deep. This happens because East Garfield has seen so much trauma that empathy itself has become a casualty. The territory here is divided among more than 20 different gang sets operating simultaneously. Each block has an owner. Madison and Kedzie area is particularly notorious, with open-air drug markets selling $10 bags of cocaine and heroin. The system works like this. Territory is split between 2 major alliances, Folk Nation and People Nation. But these alliances shift constantly based on money, revenge, and territory disputes. Crossing into the wrong block isn't just dangerous, it's often a death sentence. Gang members themselves admit that entering certain streets means risking everything. The violence isn't random either. It's systematic, territorial, and deeply embedded in the neighborhood's structure. Compare this to other dangerous areas. West Garfield Park next door has 76.3 total crimes per 1,000, but a lower violent crime rate at 14.66. Englewood on the south side shows 70.2 total crimes with 49.87 violent. Even Chicago's average sits at 40.1 total crimes with 9.8 violent. The national average? Just 23 total crimes with 4 violent incidents per 1,000 residents. In 2024, there was a 16% drop in total crimes from the previous year, which sounds encouraging until you realize the violence still concentrates heavily in specific blocks. Around 200 shooting victims occur annually when combined with adjacent West Garfield Park. The homicide rate runs 10 times the national average. Drug arrests in the west side, including East Garfield, hit 312 inches 2024, with fentanyl cases jumping 34%. The clearance rate for crimes sits at just 32%, largely because witness intimidation makes investigations nearly impossible. People see things but won't talk. They can't talk, because talking means becoming the next target. But to understand how we got here, you need to go back more than 150 years, when this land was nothing but empty prairie, and nobody could have imagined the hell it would become. In 1869, Chicago annexed what would become East Garfield Park. Back then, it was just prairie and farmland, nothing special. Development moved slowly because transportation was terrible. It wasn't until 1905 that things really started picking up. When German and Irish immigrants moved into newly built homes and apartments, These weren't shabby constructions either. We're talking about brick homes and gray stone row houses built after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Employment came from places like the Sears Roebuck Complex in nearby North Lawndale. The 1,920 seconds brought real prosperity. Apartment buildings went up everywhere, Madison Street became a bustling commercial strip, and new immigrant groups arrived, Italians and Russian Jews among them. This was a legitimate middle-class neighborhood with a future. Then 1916 happened. That's when something unique occurred. East Garfield Park became one of the first Chicago neighborhoods where middle-class black families integrated into a previously white area. And here's the thing, it worked. For years, this community was known for relative racial harmony. The black residents who moved in weren't poor. They were educated, employed, and affluent. This wasn't a ghetto. It was a desirable place to live. The Great Depression in the 1930 seconds hit hard, though. Poverty spread, and people started subdividing their homes to make ends meet. After World War II, Puerto Rican migrants settled along Madison Avenue while more African Americans moved in, seeking better opportunities. That's when white flight really accelerated. The 1,950 seconds and 1,960 seconds saw practices that would destroy the neighborhood's foundation. Redlining meant banks systematically denied loans to black families based solely on race. Then came blockbusting. Real estate agents would scare white homeowners by suggesting black families moving in would tank property values. Whites would panic sell their homes at low prices, and agents would flip them to black buyers at marked up rates while pocketing the difference. Landlords who stayed exploited black renters brutally. They'd neglect properties, refuse repairs, but raise rents constantly. The housing stock deteriorated rapidly. Between 1,950 and 1,952. The Chicago Housing Authority built Harrison Courts projects. Then came Rockwell Gardens from 1,954 to 1,961, constructed north of the Eisenhower Expressway. These projects concentrated poverty in ways that would prove devastating. By 1965, the transformation was complete. The neighborhood went from mixed to 100% African American. Every single white resident had fled. This wasn't gradual integration, it was abandonment. And with that abandonment came economic collapse. The 1,960 seconds saw unemployment shoot past 30%. Businesses closed their doors and moved out. Schools fell into disrepair as funding dried up. Public services basically stopped serving the area. Vacant lots multiplied everywhere. Madison Street, once a thriving commercial hub, turned into a shadow of itself. Buildings stood empty, windows broken, nobody maintaining anything. The infrastructure crumbled. Street lights stopped working. Sidewalks cracked and buckled. This wasn't just neglect, it was systematic disinvestment on a massive scale. The vacancy rate eventually hit 20%, meaning 1 in 5 properties sat empty. That's insane. Median household income crashed to around $25,400, less than half the city average. The poverty rate climbed to 45% compared to Chicago's 17% overall. Home values plummeted to roughly $150,000, while the city average sat at $300,000. High school graduation rates dropped to just 65%. This collapse created the perfect environment for what came next. When legitimate economic opportunities disappear, when education fails, when families struggle just to survive, when the government abandons you, the underground economy fills that vacuum. And in Chicago, during the 1,960 seconds, that underground economy meant gangs. The stage was set, the conditions were right, and the explosion was inevitable. What nobody realized was just how brutal and long-lasting that explosion would be. The vice lords arrived first in the early 1,960 seconds. They were the first major black street gang to establish serious presence in East Garfield Park. Initially, they formed for protection during the racial transition, which makes sense when you think about it. but they evolved fast. Protection turned into territory control, which turned into criminal enterprise. By 1967, the unknown Vice Lords faction had established itself, claiming the Fifth City area around the 3000 West blocks as their stronghold. The housing projects became their operational centers. Then came the Black Souls in 1962. And these guys built a reputation for extreme violence right from the start. They weren't playing around. The Black Souls became one of the most feared gangs in Chicago's entire history, controlling the Fulton corridor with an iron fist. Their methodology for maintaining territory was brutal, systematic, and effective. They formed alliances with groups like the Four Corner Hustlers and dominated the area around 3000 North. When people talk about the craziest gang element era of the 1,970 seconds through 1,990 seconds, the Black Souls are a big part of that story. After the Vice Lords and Black Souls came the Supreme Gangsters. This group would eventually evolve into something much bigger, the Gangster Disciples. The GDS brought a more organized structure than other groups had shown. They developed an effective recruitment system and started controlling the eastern and southern sections of the neighborhood, particularly around Madison and Kedzie. That area became their power base, and they established the Folk Nation alliance that still exists today. Their rivalry with the Vice Lords became permanent and deadly. The 1,970 seconds and 1,980 seconds saw an explosion of different groups. The Four Corner Hustlers, founded in 1,968 inches adjacent West Garfield Park, expanded into East Garfield. The new breeds joined in the 1,970 seconds, aligning with the Gangster Disciples. Black Disciples established their presence and claimed specific blocks. Each group carved out territory, marked their boundaries, and defended them violently. This was the era of what Chicago called super gangs. Massive organizations with complex hierarchies and clear territorial divisions. The Vice Lords weren't just one gang. They split into multiple factions. Unknown Vice Lords, traveling Vice Lords, conservative Vice Lords, each with their own leadership and territory. Same with the Gangster Disciples. They had sets all over the neighborhood, each controlling different blocks. The violence escalated month by month. Shootings became routine. Gang members couldn't enter rival territory without risking death. The rules were simple and unforgiving. Cross the wrong street, you're a target. Wear the wrong colors in the wrong place, you might not make it home. Police lost control of large areas, entire blocks where officers wouldn't go without heavy backup. Rockwell Gardens, particularly buildings 2,417 and 340, became Gangster Disciples' fortresses. They controlled those projects completely, running 24-hour drug operations. Kids got recruited young, sometimes as early as elementary school. Families trapped in those buildings lived in constant fear, with stairwells and hallways serving as killing zones. The territorial wars defined everything. Gangster Disciples versus Vice Lords became the primary rivalry, but Black Souls fought GD sets too. And sometimes Vice Lord factions battled each other. Folk Nation versus People Nation played out in its most extreme form here, with every block serving as a battlefield. Innocent victims got caught constantly. Drive-by shootings became standard operating procedure, and the cycle of retaliation never ended. Someone from one gang gets killed, so they retaliate, which causes another retaliation, on and on forever. Generations of kids grew up in what felt like a war zone because it essentially was a war zone. The sound of gunfire became background noise. Funerals happened every week. Mothers buried their sons. Sisters buried their brothers. Children lost parents. The trauma embedded itself in the community's DNA, creating psychological wounds that persist today. This wasn't just crime. It was systematic destruction of human potential on a massive scale. When crack cocaine hit Chicago in the mid-1,980 seconds, it transformed everything about gang operations in East Garfield Park. Suddenly, we're not talking about small-time criminal activity anymore. The profits from crack were massive, and that kind of money changed the entire game. Gangs evolved from street groups into sophisticated drug trafficking organizations practically overnight. Every major corner became a sales point. Madison Street turned into an open-air market where you could buy $10 bags of cocaine and heroin any time of day or night. The violence intensified because now every corner, every block, every alley had real monetary value. Controlling territory meant controlling income, and groups would kill to protect or expand their market share. The wars over drug-selling locations got absolutely brutal. In the 1,990 seconds, East Garfield Park saw hundreds of shootings annually. This decade became the deadliest period in the neighborhood's history. The crack epidemic didn't just bring violence, though. It destroyed families from the inside. Addiction tore through the community. Parents got hooked, kids got neglected, and the cycle of poverty and crime accelerated dramatically. Rockwell Gardens during this period was essentially hell on earth. Buildings 2,417 and 340 functioned as Gangster Disciples strongholds, where they ran non-stop drug operations. You could buy drugs there any hour, any day. Young kids got recruited into the life often before they even hit their teens. Families living in those buildings were trapped with nowhere else to go. The projects became so dangerous that police feared entering without massive backup and tactical gear. The stairwells and hallways turned into death traps. People got robbed, assaulted, or killed just trying to get to their apartments. Mothers would wait until daylight to take their kids to school because nighttime in those buildings meant taking your life in your hands. Even after Rockwell Gardens got demolished, the legacy continued. Former residents spread throughout East Garfield Park, and groups like Rube City traced their roots directly back to those buildings. The folk nation versus people nation conflict reached its peak during this era. Gangster disciples and vice lords fought constantly. Black souls battled GD sets. Different vice lord factions sometimes turned on each other. The boundaries were clear. This block belongs to us, that block belongs to them, and if you cross the line without permission, you're getting shot. It wasn't theoretical. It was the daily reality. Drive-by shootings became the preferred method of attack. A car would roll up slowly, someone would open fire for a few seconds, and they'd speed off before anyone could react. Sometimes they hit their intended targets, often they didn't. Innocent people got caught in the crossfire constantly. Kids playing outside, people waiting at bus stops, families sitting on their porches. All became potential victims. The retaliation cycle never stopped. Gang A shoots someone from Gang B. So Gang B has to retaliate or they look weak, which causes Gang A to retaliate again. And on it goes forever. Nobody could back down because backing down meant losing respect, losing territory, losing money. The violence fed on itself, creating a perpetual motion machine of death and destruction. The human cost went far beyond the murder statistics. Entire generations grew up without fathers because of incarceration. The war on drugs sent thousands of black men to prison for years or decades. Kids raised by single mothers struggled in underfunded schools. The trauma became generational, passed down from parents to children. Hospital emergency rooms received shooting victims so regularly that staff became desensitized. Ambulances rolled into the neighborhood multiple times per night during the worst periods. Teachers tried teaching students who'd witnessed murders, who'd lost family members to violence, who couldn't concentrate because they were traumatized. Mental health services were non-existent. Community resources dried up completely. Every institution that could have helped, churches, schools, social services, they were all overwhelmed and underfunded. The neighborhood was drowning, and nobody threw a life preserver. And this period created wounds that East Garfield Park still hasn't recovered from decades later. Let's break down who controls what in East Garfield Park right now in 2025. Starting with Gangster Disciples territory, you've got Ike Sims' MPF, also called the Maple family, operating around Maple and Kedzie. This set is actually a hybrid crew mixing Gangster Disciples with traveling vice lords, which is pretty unusual. They maintain strong alliance with the Fifth City community, but have a deadly rivalry with the Black Souls that's been going on for years. Over at Washington and California, Rube City runs the show. This Gangster Disciple set traces its roots directly back to buildings 2,417 and 340 of the now demolished Rockwell Gardens. They're affiliated with the Maniac Gangster Disciples branch and carry that housing project legacy forward. Then you've got a gang, also known as 2700, controlling Adams and Washington with deep neighborhood roots in the 2700 block. And there's YSL, or Stunt Life, based around Wilcox and San Francisco, staying active in local street activity. The Vice Lords have multiple factions operating simultaneously, which makes their presence even more complex. Conservative Vice Lords run a Rose Gang, nicknamed Bankroll, near Lexington and Sacramento. The unknown Vice Lords have several sets scattered throughout. Fifth Avenue, called the J-Boys, holds down Fifth, and Miller, Boo Mob Yodi Money Team, operates at Spalding and Van Buren. The Money Team set sits at Monroe and Homan and includes the rapper Geesim in their ranks. A St. Louis Money family controls the Monomy area. Traveling Vice Lords are particularly strong in East Garfield, TT 2 Cali Mob, founded by Ugly Frank at California and Lexington, goes by the name 2 Turned Up. They maintain tight ties with other TVL sets, but they're actively at war with various Gangster Disciple factions across the West Side. The Harrison Boys, also known as Smarty World, originated from the Harrison Courts housing complex and still hold influence from that base. SOA, short for Straight Out Albany, operates at Lexington and Albany, emphasizing internal unity and alliance building with other TVL hoods. Black Disciples have their presence too. Pig Mob runs Madison and Albany, based in the 5th Ward with deep BD connections throughout the West Side. Then there's the Sack Boys, another Vice Lord affiliated set active in the area. Zoo Street at Fulton. And Kedzie is a high-profile faction known for volatility. It's marked as a hot corner on local gang maps and stays involved in ongoing street conflicts. Shorty Gang operates out of Fulton and St. Louis, tightly connected with all other East Garfield Park Black Souls sets. They're frequently at war with East Garfield GD sets, especially in the western sections. The alliance dynamics shift constantly based on convenience rather than loyalty. Sets from the same parent gang sometimes beef with each other over territory or money. Temporary collaborations happen when groups face common enemies, but betrayals are frequent. The lines between factions get blurry sometimes. Some sets are hybrids, mixing members from multiple gangs, like the Maple family's GD and TVL combination. Loyalty to your specific block often supersedes loyalty to the larger gang structure. Geography determines alliances more than traditional hierarchical organization. If your block is surrounded by enemies, you might team up with groups you'd normally beef with just for survival. The money from drug sales complicates everything further. A set making good money from their corner won't give it up for any reason, regardless of what their parent gang leadership says. This creates a fragmented landscape, where understanding who's allied with who requires constant updating. Today's friends might be tomorrow's enemies if territorial disputes or money conflicts arise. Some blocks have stayed under the same gang's control for decades, while others change hands through violence. Certain corners are so valuable for drug sales that they've seen multiple shootouts over the years as different groups try to take control. The result is a neighborhood where every single block has meaning, where crossing certain streets at certain times can get you killed, where wearing specific colors or throwing certain hand signs marks you as a target. This isn't theoretical gang structure. It's the lived reality for everyone in East Garfield Park. Residents navigate this landscape daily, knowing which blocks to avoid, which routes are safer, which times are more dangerous. It's exhausting, it's traumatic, and it's the only life many people there have ever known. The mass shooting incident near Westlake shows you exactly what living in East Garfield Park means. 15 total victims in one shooting. 14 people suffered gunshot wounds, and one woman got hit by a car fleeing the scene. This wasn't some prolonged gun battle either. The whole thing happened in about 3 seconds. Police got called just before 3 in the morning to the 3,500 block of Westlake, where they found 6 initial victims. These people were standing in a large group when someone started shooting from a light-colored sedan. Bullets hit a 25-year-old man and 5 women ranging from 27 to 38 years old. Then there's the family attack. Surveillance cameras from a corner store captured everything. You see a family, 2 women and 5 children, getting into their car. Just as they settle inside, a gray sedan drives past, barely slowing down. Someone inside sprays bullets directly at them. Police confirmed that siblings aged 5, 14, and 15 all got hit. 3 other people standing on the sidewalk went down too, including Tamaya Russell, a 20-year-old psychology major at Rock Valley College in Rockford. She was just standing there. Another incident involved a teenager found shot in the neck on Adams near Hallman, right next to John Marshall Metropolitan High School, just lying in the street. And there was the 66-year-old man pulled from his car by 2 people who shot him in the stomach before stealing his vehicle and taking off. But the overdose crisis might be even more disturbing. There was a mass overdose from drugs sold on the west side that killed multiple people and hospitalized at least 10 others in a single day. When one man collapsed in the middle of the street, almost nobody helped. One person called 911, while others nearby just watched. Some even laughed. Think about that for a second. Someone's dying right in front of you, and your response is to laugh. That's the level of trauma and desensitization we're talking about. Turns out that overdose wave came from heroin laced with fentanyl sold by a four-corner hustlers operation. In 2022, authorities busted 10 members running a trafficking ring that distributed fentanyl-mixed heroin throughout the area. These incidents happen weekly, not monthly, weekly. People get shot sitting in cars, walking to the store, standing on corners, basically just existing in public space. The economic impact compounds everything. Median household income sits at $25,400, less than half Chicago's average. Poverty rate hits 45% compared to the city's 17%. 1 in 5 homes stands vacant, creating dead zones where criminal activity thrives. Property values remain at roughly $150,000, while the rest of Chicago averages $300,000. Only 65% of residents graduate high school. Unemployment runs around 30%. Food deserts mean families struggle to find fresh groceries within walking distance. Health disparities are extreme, with asthma rates elevated from environmental blight and stress-related illnesses widespread. Many residents have never visited downtown Chicago, despite living just a few miles away. The isolation is both geographic and social, creating an invisible wall that keeps people trapped in the neighborhood. The cost calculation shows each household loses roughly $2,300 annually just from crime-related impacts. That includes property damage, stolen goods, medical expenses, lost work time, increased insurance, and decreased property values. For families already struggling financially, that's devastating. In 2023, the neighborhood recorded 8,500 crime incidents per 100,000 people annually. Drug arrests in the west side, including East Garfield, hit 312 inches, 2024, with fentanyl cases jumping 34% from previous years. The clearance rate for crimes sits at only 32%. Why so low? Witness intimidation. People see crimes happen, but won't testify because doing so makes them targets. Snitches get stitches isn't just a saying here. It's enforced policy. Families of witnesses have been threatened, attacked, even killed for cooperating with police. So crimes go unsolved, criminals stay free, and the cycle continues. Kids grow up hearing gunshots as background noise. They learn which blocks to avoid, which colors not to wear, which hand signs mean danger. Childhood in East Garfield Park means navigating a landscape where playing outside could get you killed. Schools operate under constant security concerns. Teachers deal with traumatized students who struggle to focus because they witnessed violence the night before or lost a family member recently. This isn't living, it's surviving. Some revitalization efforts are happening. In 2025, officials celebrated the opening of Fifth City Commons, an affordable housing development in East Garfield Park. The complex includes 43 apartments, 2 community rooms, a resident terrace, a fitness room, and 3 laundry rooms. It's a start, but when you compare it to the scale of need, it barely makes a dent. The Garfield Park Conservatory serves as a major attraction, and recent expansions aim to create jobs and draw tourism to the area. Federal investment through various housing programs continues trickling in. Organizations like Build, founded way back in 1969, work as violence interrupters in the community. Ex-gang members like Marcus Moon Mitchell, a former Gangster Disciple, now do outreach, trying to stop the cycle they once perpetuated. The Institute for Nonviolence Chicago maintains presence in the neighborhood with programs targeting at-risk youth. They mediate conflicts before they escalate into violence. The Garfield Park Right to Wellness collaborative focuses on prevention and youth support using a public health model for violence intervention. Citywide, Chicago saw a 20% drop in homicides in 2024. And these community-based models get partial credit for that decrease. But here's the reality. Despite all these efforts, East Garfield Park remains one of Chicago's most dangerous neighborhoods. Roughly 200 shooting victims occur annually when you combine it with adjacent West Garfield Park. The homicide rate still runs 10 times the national average. Gang operations continue without any real decrease. Drug markets stay open. Youth recruitment hasn't stopped. Territorial rivalries remain as intense as ever. The cycle perpetuates itself across generations because the fundamental conditions haven't changed. Fentanyl cases jumped 34% in 1 year. That tells you the drug trade is actually growing, not shrinking. The clearance rate of 32% means most criminals never face consequences, which encourages more crime. Residents themselves are vocal about what they need. They call for investment, not militarization. One common question is, why are there no resources in East Garfield compared to downtown? Community members want to be interviewed about crime trends rather than having outsiders define their narrative. Local voices get ignored in media coverage that focuses on sensational violence while missing deeper systemic issues. Block club leaders try reviving community events and holiday celebrations. Families remain determined to reclaim their neighborhood's future. But there's tension between realistic hope and justified despair. Some community members believe change is possible with proper support, while others see decades of broken promises and empty gestures. Comparing East Garfield to other neighborhoods that achieved transformation shows what's missing. Successful turnarounds required massive investment, not token programs. They needed job creation at scale, dramatic improvements in education, comprehensive social services, and sustained political will over many years. None of that exists here. The question remains, can East Garfield Park actually change? Or is it stuck in a cycle too deeply entrenched to break? The factors that would make real difference are clear. Sustained economic investment, creating legitimate opportunities, school funding that actually meets student needs, mental health services addressing generational trauma, affordable housing that doesn't concentrate poverty, and violence interruption programs with real resources. But without political will, the cycle continues. East Garfield Park becomes a case study in how abandonment creates generational violence. It's a symbol of systemic failure, showing what happens when society writes off entire communities. The debate centers on whether solutions are even possible or if we're just treating symptoms of a disease we refuse to cure. Responsibility is collective, not individual. Framing gang violence as purely personal choice ignores how policy decisions created these conditions. Redlining, disinvestment, mass incarceration, school defunding. These weren't natural disasters. They were choices. And they have consequences that last generations. The current approach offers cosmetic measures without addressing root causes. A 43-unit housing development is nice, but what about the thousands of vacant properties? Violence interrupters do important work, but they're overwhelmed and underfunded. Conservatory expansions bring some tourism, but they don't create enough jobs to matter at scale. Real change would require commitment that hasn't materialized in 50 years. It would mean viewing East Garfield Park as valuable, as worth saving, as deserving of the same investment wealthy neighborhoods receive automatically. Until that fundamental shift happens, the neighborhood will remain trapped between hope and despair, with residents doing their best to survive in conditions nobody should have to endure. That's the brutal truth nobody in power wants to confront.